Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, and welcome back to Fanalysis, Star Wars. I'm Callum, this is Evan,
Hello, everyone.
and today we're going to be talking about the Star Wars book, Shadows of the Empire. Well, I say Star Wars book, we'll be talking a bit more about how that's not just a book, Evan, if you want to lead us into that.
Yeah, Shadows of the Empire is best described as a multimedia project, which not only includes this book, which is kind of the cornerstone of the whole story, it includes the Shadows of the Empire video game that was released on the Nintendo 64, a graphic novel adaptation, an RPG game guide, a significant boost to the trading card game, which actually included a lot of illustrations from this book specifically, as well as a toy line, interestingly enough, that included some figures that were never ever seen before. So suffice it to say that this story really is one of the more expansive aspects of the original Star Wars EU. I mean, even Force Unleashed arguably didn't get quite the same treatment as this story did, which is very, very interesting and definitely stands out. Oh, and it further stands out by the fact that even George Lucas approved of a lot of the concept used in this story.
I meant to look that up before we started the recording, actually, about whether or not he'd had direct influence with this one more than other books, because there are a few concepts in this that I wasn't aware had been introduced prior to the prequels coming out, and that seemed to plug quite neatly in with the prequels ahead of when they were released. I'd be interested to see how much active kind of involvement he had when this story was laid out. Things like Palpatine being a senator and the mentioning of the Sith in certain ways, etc.
Yeah, I think it's the direct involvement he had, I think, is a little. I don't know how much of it's actually been confirmed. I know for a fact it has definitely been confirmed that he approved of the story and several of the concepts. I think even Xizor's character design was partially influenced by Lucas as well. And as far as like the story concepts, this would be 1996, so the prequels,
Mm.
while obviously not out yet, we're definitely on Lucas's mind. So it does make sense that there's a lot of carryover, plus things like the Thrawn trilogy and even I think at the very least the first volume of Dark Empire had been released at this point as well. So a lot of things like Coruscant and the criminal underworld and things like that were pretty fresh, as far as just established lore goes. So it is actually very surprising how well it fits in, even though there are a few references here and there that maybe if this book was written, during like the early 2000s might have been a little bit differently, particularly with things like Vader's origin. But
Mm.
yeah, it is very interesting how well it slots into. And I think that really does help for the overall staying power of this book because, you know, ki- unlike certain aspects of like the Thrawn trilogy, which we mentioned previously, things are kind of kept just level enough to where, even if certain things that would come later and might have been retconned, you can still sort of take the story as it is, and it does, flow very nicely. I always sort of viewed this book as very much, this book to me does to Return of the Jedi what Labyrinth of Evil does for Revenge of the Sith, in the
Good
sense
way of
that it's a
putting it, actually.
bridging
Yeah.
point between, yeah, it's a bridging point within the two films, and a lot of like what we see in Jedi is established here, not just aesthetically, but like things like Luke's development, the nature of Han being delivered to Jabba the Hutt, the mission, them coming up with that, even the things like the construction of Luke's lightsaber are all showcased here, and it's a very, very smooth transition, and I really appreciate Steve Perry for doing that. And for those who might recognize Steve Perry, he also co-authored the MedStar duology as well as the Death Star novel. Ironically, all with Matt Reeves. They tend to team up quite a bit when it comes to their writing, but this one is all him. So if you recognize the name, he's definitely seasoned and would go on to be later on.
And the book as a whole, like I said, the whole media project of this era, was kind of the first kind of bright spark to that degree that we see ahead of the Clone Wars multimedia project that was like the mainstay of the 2000s era for the franchise. I mean, this was kind of like that test bed of, okay, let's see how we can do for
Very much so. I agree.
expanding into this multi-level approach with like you said, with the toys and the comics and the game, etc. It really was like the kind of a peak in the graph, as it were, for that side of things.
It is interesting how much
Varyingly
iconography
successful.
also carries over as well into those projects, that
Mm.
were established. Things like the Black Sun hierarchy, which of course would go on to be expanded in like the Darth Maul comic. Things like the Imperial I mean, even things just like the Imperial Navy and how they're set up and Vader's influence in that. You could definitely see a lot of the seeds for things that would be expanded later on, like you were saying in the Clone Wars project. So yeah, it's very interesting to see where that all stemmed from.
Yeah, out of universe, the success was clear in terms of all the different projects coming together and gelling. I think that was very successful and proved the concept for moving into the Clone Wars when they were really going to turn us up to 11. For the book itself, though, and the story as a whole, I'm kind of mixed on it. I mean, I enjoyed it going through it, but it's felt on the writing level a lot more basic than some of the other projects we've been talking about more recently. More along the lines of Carbashin's Bane trilogy in kind of execution than anything like the Thrawn trilogy or any of the other ones we've talked about recently. Basically, it was very basic on the prose level, not to as bad a degree as we were talking about with the Bane trilogy, but to an extent where I was okay, this is not the best we've seen from Star Wars in terms of the craft. Having said that, I mean, even if you didn't like some of the content, there's so much content in this book. There's going to be something that you're going to enjoy. It really does feel. I mean, you get to about a third of the way through, and you feel like you must be 3/4, and it's like, oh no, I've still got all this time left. he crams a lot into a very short space of time for each kind of third of this story.
I agree. I really do enjoy this book, even though I very much am on the same wavelength. The writing definitely reads a lot more simply than I remember. What I really think Steve Perry does here, though, that I do appreciate with the character work is, yes, he's very sparse on the prose, but he's also very good at giving like little character descriptors in the dialogue that really kind of help give a sense of not only the moments of urgency, but also the moments of levity, like things like where I always think of like when Lando walks into the room when him and Leia are testing the scanner, and he does like this little twirl about like here I am, and then period, and then he says enjoy, like in just one word.
Lando
just
is a real
enjoy.
standout in
one
this.
word
I know we talked about it with the
that
previous book as well, but this is a real standout for me. Lando is hilarious all throughout this.
Oh, Lando is a gem in this book. I mean, he's always a gem, but
Yeah.
in this, he's just so on point. But like little things like that, where he'll add like 1 or 2 or 3 word little descriptors following a character beat or following a dialogue, it really helps to add that layer of believability to both the thought process and just the general I guess I would say zeitgeist of the situation. Like unlike with Karpyshyn, and I'm not saying this to rag on Karpyshyn or anything, but his descriptive style is very straight and to the point. And yes, I completely agree with you. Steve Perry's writing style in this is very much like that. But I feel as though what makes it flow a bit better for me compared to the Bane trilogy is that those little descriptors and those little character beats, it's less such and such does so because, and it's more such and such does because XYZ, and he is feeling this, he is feeling that, these moments mean this, and just little details like that do make it kind of like I said, flow a bit more naturally in my opinion. Again, it definitely, like, I loved this book when I was growing up. Honestly, like there was even a brief period where I would almost, if you asked me when I was a teenager, where I would rank this book, I would probably say it was in my top 10. I'm not quite sure if I feel that same way now, but even though it hasn't quite aged as well as I might have hoped, it is still a very enjoyable experience. And again, what really makes this book for me is the character beats, because particularly with people like Vader and Leia, and like you're saying with Lando, like all the character beats are very spot on, and things with Luke as well. And I also appreciate like even characters kind of like Dash Rendar, who are like very much intended to be archetypal, and that's not even me like making a jab. Like literally, it's been stated that they took inspiration from characters in Top Gun to make him be like this archetypal, a swashbuckler sort of like arrogant dude.
Kind of a stand in for Han
layers
had to be absent for this, I guess.
Exactly.
Is kind of the idea, the fitting there. Yeah, people who are so attracted to that character as their kind of archetypal choice. It's like, oh, there's a hole in the story. Where is that character? Here it is.
Exactly. But at the same time, like they do enough with him to where you sort of get where he's coming from, and he does have an arc throughout. So even though the writing is very basic, I feel that they do enough with these characters to make it a very smooth and enjoyable experience.
I think that the thing for this, I completely agree. In terms of like the content and what's happening in scene, and particularly in the strength of the dialogue and the conversation work, I think that that's got the kind of the true strength of the story. this is another case where, I mean, we mentioned with Carbushin how he's obviously best utilized, in our opinion, as a video game writer. So, writing the script for dialogue and script for scene work in the video game, and not having to rely on heavy prose for internal dialogue, internal musings, and just generally scoping out a scene based on description, etc. And it's basically the same thing for Steve Perry. I think that if this was more of a visual medium, not necessarily a video game, but maybe more of a comic or even just a TV show, I think the quality would be register much higher for me. It's purely based on the fact that some of the in kind of internal musings of the character, some of the, there's a few cases of repeated description. Some of just the general craft of storytelling with the book, it didn't quite hit all those same beats as some of the other classics we've been discussing recently. That's all. Far from poor, and even, in my opinion, a step up from Carbushin's with the Bane trilogy as well. It's just in that area more than the other stories. Yeah. You can see the same sort of trends coming up through this. But again, just a general vibe for me on the book as a whole. In terms of my enjoyment, I'm right there with you. I thought that first of all, it was very funny throughout. There's a lot of really strong humor in this book, which is it's kind of not easy to do, but it's kind of helped by the characters you're utilizing with people like Lando and even Dash to an extent with how he's introduced him to the reader. But even putting that aside, he managed to make the droids funny, like the scene when 3PO and R2 are flying the Falcon. You can just
oh yeah,
feel
that's gold.
It's obviously it's very cheesy, but because it's the Falcon and you personally are invested in that ship as almost of a character on its own, you're like, oh god, you're right there listening to with Luke listening over the comms channel, and in particular you're thinking about Han. You're like, oh my god, what's he gonna do when he hears about this?
He's in carbonite right now, and it's just,
Leia kind of gets that message across for him. It's like, you let the droids fly the ship, But so he's really good with humor all the way throughout. So I've always really enjoyed that. And as I said before, in terms of what he's cramming in content wise, I mean, this is a dense book.
Yeah.
You could
the world building is extensive in this book
for sure, and not just that, but just the amount that. I mean, by the time, for example, you get to the swoop bike scene on Tatooine, that feels like you're pretty far into the book, and that's still very early on. Every kind of chopped up sequences. I mean, some of the choices narratively, they shouldn't work particularly, in my opinion. Like, for example, when they're trying to recover Han from Boba Fett, they're going to fail. So nothing about this plan really has any stakes. You're just wondering about how it's going to go wrong. But the way they choose to kind of elevate different moments and throughout the sequence, and again, particularly as you said with the dialogue, they make it engaging. They're putting as much effort as they can, or he can rather, as a single author, into kind of squeezing the drama out through interactions with Lando and Leia in that scene's case, or
and he makes the conflict believable. So even when they fail or succeed, because like you were saying, like we know that they fail, but they still came close enough to where you buy what happened. It's not just a cheap crux for a drama. It makes it to where like, if anything, it just heightens what happens in Jedi, because it's like, that, oh man, like they've come so close to getting him back already. They're just that more determined to, rescue him at this point. Adds a bit more weight to it, which I really do appreciate, because, like I said, I think I mentioned something similar when it came to the Dark Force. It's like, other authors might lean on that as just a crux for, a crutch, I should say, to just manufacture tension when none exists or none would be necessary. But the way he weaves in the story beats of them, like, okay, this is how they learned of the information, this is how they're going to set up the plan, this is what they're going to do, okay, they're executing it, but then this thing happens, which means that they can't quite succeed in the way that they do. The fact that everything is set up in a way that where you've seen all the steps, and I actually think this is where the descriptive style kind of helps him. You see all the steps going into these plans, and you also see the steps that go into the reasoning why it fails. They don't just fail because they fail in a way that you actually buy it. So when it really does happen, you understand it and you don't feel cheapened, which, is not the easiest thing for any author to do, especially at this point. So I really do have to give him credit, because as simple as the writing is, everything is sort of, there's enough backstory and there's enough content, again, that denseness that we were talking about, to really make you understand each situation as it is. In fact, like you're saying, it really does read like a series, like a short mini
just from how much happens. I mean, just think, you go to Tatooine and back multiple times. You've got all the different space combats. You've got 4 or 5 different independent and engaging and interesting space combats throughout this story. They've got them going to the casino, spending a fair time at the casino. You've got all the different parts of Rhodia, Bothui, Kothis. There's so many things happen, and so many different different places in this
Is
story.
this the first time we ever see Bathawui?
I think
Like,
so.
I'm
Yeah.
actually
I mean,
trying to.
this is
One of the first
because
times.
that's a good
Also, the
example
setup,
of.
the Death Star, the second Death
Yeah,
Star
that's what I'm
plans,
about to
like
say. Yeah, so
all
that's
that.
what kind of makes this work for me, because this is not a story that anyone needed telling, right? No one needed to know anything
Right.
about the setup for Return of the Jedi. It's just, it happened, you move on. You know, this isn't stuff that you need to know. It's the kind of the situation with what they did with Rogue One. You know, you don't need to know any of that. But
Mhm.
having decided to tell that story anyway, this is how you should do it. You know, you introduce largely detached information that isn't like, you're not jumping straight into, okay, how are we going to rescue Han the way we did in the film? You're not starting from that point. That kind of get gradually evolved into, as the story progresses. You know, it dials up the inclusion of different aspects that we recognize from the films. You know, starting with the lightsaber construction, as you said, which is the main thematic spiritual character example of that as well. So it should be front and center for that reason alone. And also, plot-wise, it's going to be useful as a tool for like Luke, because he's needing a lightsaber to do half the things that Luke's supposed to be able to do. So it all makes sense to have that up front. But then you also gradually pick up little pieces and bits and pieces that you're going to recognize from that are less important. You know, things like Leia's costume, the thermal detonators is a cheeky one that he throws in at the end, used very amusingly in the actual plot as well. Things like, I mean, the plans of the Death Star, that alone, we find out, you know, who the Bothans were. Yeah, many Bothans died to bring us this information. We now know those Bothans, and that one in particular. So, you know, he's doing all the work that he needs to kind of tell that story, even though it didn't need to be told, he's doing enough and packing it in densely enough. Like we say, kind of over the course of what feels like a TV series.
It is a 40-chapter book, so
yeah,
it's like you'll get a lot.
Just the destinations alone, like you can tick off on a sheet like how many places they go. It is a lot, and none of it feels underdeveloped. You know, I don't necessarily feel like I needed it all. This isn't a book that I'm like excited to pick up a lot of the time, or ever really. I found it, to be honest, it dipped in enjoyment from midway through, but not because it was bad, but because you don't. I was reading this quite quickly to get ready for this recording. It's more of the book you want to read over the course of like a month as you dip in and out. As a continued Star Wars experience. You don't want to take it in one big binge read, because it will just because it doesn't kind of ebb and flow in the way a traditional story does, given that density. You know, the fact that you're basically having like 4 or 5 different stories told within the same overall narrative. It lends itself to that more long-term reading, more time dipping in and out for me. There's a point there somewhere, but I was going where? I think I lost the trail there.
Well, I mean,
you get
definitely
what I mean.
Feel like, absolutely. I mean, you know, it can definitely be said that you're getting your money's worth with this book, because you know, in terms of the world building, because I think it also really helps too that we pretty much always stay with our main cast, even though they are split up at various points. So you never, yes, we do get a lot of like transitions, but since we're sticking with the same people that we know and love up until this point, it never feels too jarring, because each set piece has a very specific point. They go to the casino to meet with, you know, Greedo's uncle in order to get information about Black Sun. Luke goes with Dash Rendar to Bathawui because, you know, the Bothans sent information to Leia, but Leia's not available right now, so they have to go collect it because they, you know, the importance of it is something the Alliance can't ignore. Everything has a purpose for the most part, or even things like with Vader, like, you know, Vader is being sent out to, you know, take on this rebel shipyard because even though he doesn't want to do it, he knows that this would be a big blow to the Alliance, you know, as far as, you know, fleet building is concerned. So again, yes, I completely agree with you. The transitions are, you know, it is very dense, but what I really do think helps is everything serves some purpose in the end. You never really feel like, as dense as it is, you know, I never felt like, okay, can we just move on from this? Like, no, like everything really does.
It's definitely not. I definitely don't intend it as a criticism that way. I'm just saying it's one of those things where
no, I'm not saying you did.
Yeah, no, but it's like a reader's warning. You know, just take this over a longer period of time. You know, give it a few weeks to kind of dip in and out of this and enjoy it, kind of as a individual piecemeal stories going throughout, because it's not the kind of story that's intended to grip you and like, oh, you must read the next page as you go. It's too. There is literally too much happening in this for that to be the case.
Right.
It's too. It's like, and not just too much happening overall, because other books do that as well and keep you gripped, but it's too much of the same style. It's like it's trying to capture multiple Star Wars, you know, holistic experiences within the one story. You know, you've got the whole X-wing Rogue Squadron story at the start. You've got you know, the Smuggler's Escape story. You've got the Death Star plans capture story. You've got, you know, all of this is happening and has a fair amount of overlap in style choices between them, each one, that you just don't want to get them all in one overloaded delivery. You need to kind of pace it out, in my opinion.
It's like, Yeah, it's like when you're eating deep dish pizza. You don't want to rush it because
Yes.
then it'll
One
overload you.
slice
But
at a
but
time.
you
One
take
slice at a time.
exactly, exactly. If you want a New York slice, you might want to go somewhere else. But for
Yeah.
this, you definitely want to kind of keep things slow. But at that same point, it's like deep dish pizza. It's a delicious experience.
Mm.
Um,
No, it's a good
but
metaphor
from
for that.
that, and I agree, and yeah, absolutely, and I will say too, like one thing I can't really praise enough for this book is the characterization and the world building, especially when you consider the time. Like we basically learn like everything that's established about Black Sun, for example, in this book will basically become the standard for the
It is
organization for
definitely
this
the template for that organization in particular. Yeah, all of the rest of
100%.
the world building is strong as well. But if you just take one individual thing that this book kind of gave the franchise, Black Sun would be it. There's no question about that.
Yeah, it really put Black Sun on the map as far as not just, organization, but just structure, influence. I mean, the criminal element in general. I mean, it's very much the Star Wars underworld story,
Mm.
put into frame. And not just Black Sun, I mean Jabba and his organization, their dealings with the Empire, how the other factions aside from the Empire and the Alliance, their influence on the galaxy, how they, kind of double dip into both realms and how that affects a galaxy at war. It's very interesting what they do. And again, the fact that they can make it seem so lived in is, again, it's impressive for any author. And, the fact that they did set so many standards, it's very impressive to see. And I gotta definitely give it credit for that.
Mm. I meant to mention a bit earlier on because it's obviously not the story's fault at all, but I did listen to this one. And the audiobook, I mean, we
Yeah,
talked about it a lot
the new
with
unabridged audiobook.
yeah, with
Yeah.
Dark Lord Rise of Darth Vader. Basically everything we said about that audiobook is true of this one. My God,
Mm.
whoever is directing this fantastic narrator, who as always has done a
Yeah.
fantastic job, needs to dial down the enthusiasm because my God, the amount of times I'm hearing like, why are you so enthusiastic about this line? I mean, very early on it was shocking with the context of Leia. She's sort of in her mind, she's just musing about the frustrating aspects of having Chewbacca there as a bodyguard all the time, kind of hovering over her and worrying about, etc.
Mhm.
And she's just sitting there, as like, it was frustrating. It's like, Jesus, Leia, take a chill pill. He's
For
honoring a
real,
life
yeah.
debt.
I mean, it's a bit much. I mean, sometimes
A lot of line reads
yeah,
happen that way throughout this story. I mean, again, you kind of get used to it as you go through, same as what I said with
yeah.
Rise of Darth Vader, but it's just, it's a
One
lot.
thing I never quite got used to was his Wookiee language noises. I mean, it's so aggressive.
It's
It's like
very
I had to like
aggressive, yeah.
you
To
know,
be
turn
fair,
down the volume sometimes. It's like, whoa.
yeah, to be fair, it's a very
I
hard
mean, it's
thing to
Wookiee
do.
speak. I get it. So it's
Yeah,
like it's not going to be the most pleasant thing ever. But it's like, whoa, geez.
it is hard thing to deliver, so I forgive him for that one. But yeah, you're right. It's
Yeah.
not quite as on par because everything else, in terms of the voice, obviously not going to be able to pull off a female voice quite as well, because it's a male narrator. But even then, very capable throughout, and people like Lando and
I mean,
even
his
people like
Lando impression side actually is pretty spot on. But then
yeah, the
again, it kind
Emperor,
of
which
always
is as always because it's the
yes.
cartoonish over the topness, is an easier one to do. Most people can do a reasonable Emperor, but his is spot on. Darth Vader was
Yeah.
very good as well. We talked about not being as keen on him in the Dark Lord book. That was
I
for
think
me
he was
very
better in
good
this
here.
one,
Yeah,
honestly.
very
Even though
very
it's the
strong.
same sort of cadence,
Yeah,
it's definitely better. And I think the
less
fact that
Anakin
I mean,
whining
I think the
aspect in
writing
there as
style
well. That
yeah,
helps.
absolutely. Yeah, I think actually the more descriptive writing style kind of helps with Vader in particular when it comes to the audio drama because it's
Mm.
less the insane prose emotionality and more just the clipped straightforward way of speaking, which does kind of help. And I agree. I think someone probably told him to dial it down a little bit when it comes to Vader
Yeah,
after the last one,
and dial everything
which is
back up
fine.
again because the
Yeah, I
narrative.
mean Shizor's voice is perfect. Frankly, I mean it's
Yeah,
exactly
I mean, we'll
what
get
I
on
think
to
you would
Xizor when we talk about the characters, but yeah, a hell of a performance if nothing else for that character. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, just
absolutely.
fantastic across the board. But just please, whoever is directing these people, dial down the enthusiasm. You're allowed to just have a casual, simple few lines in a
Mhm.
take.
Yeah,
What else? There was
definitely.
one I wanted to. Oh yeah, the Flemmy guide through the sewers near the tail end of the story. My
Oh
God,
yeah.
was that gross? I mean, Jesus, perfect execution. But I was feeling a bit sick as I listened to it. I was just like getting Flemmy in the
Oh
back
yeah,
of
the
my throat. I was
noise
like, oh God, it's just constant.
sort of thing, yeah.
That was a
Makes
gross
you
section to listen to. But
mhm.
yeah, no,
Ab
fantastic audiobook overall in terms of performance. But yeah, direction, I would just dial it way back because that enthusiasm
Mhm.
grates and takes a lot to get used to as you go through it. But yeah, that's all we'll say about that. That's not the
Absolutely.
story's fault.
Mhm. Should we move into characters now?
Yes, yeah, because like I said, we talked about it before the recording. We were considering plot options for this, but because it is so densely packed, you are literally doing like 5 to 10 different stories in one. So
Hmm.
if you read it, you'll enjoy the plot as you go through. Again, like we said, take it bite size, single slice at a time. Don't go
Yeah.
through this in one big sitting. It will not serve the story well. But what we can do is slice up based on characters, because that's kind of the point of the
Absolutely, because
story.
it is a character piece, and it's a
Yeah.
fantastic character piece. That's where the biggest strength lies. Like if you're someone who really does appreciate, more character driven, writing and dialogue, this book is 100% for you because the its biggest strength do lie in that area. Not that the like I said, not that the overall plot is bad or anything. It's just more simplistic.
Well,
But
you
simple does
you
not
seem
mean
very
bad.
enthusiastic about that, because I wasn't as exuberant about it as a character piece. I think it's a solid one, but I wasn't like, oh, it's a fantastic one. So what do you love about it in particular? What was kind of really working for you?
I think what really works for me is like how the character traits are expressed in their own unique way of writing. Because with things like Luke Skywalker, his more simplistic sort of spiritual mindset, or things with Leia, her determination, but also her sort of emotionality with Han being captured, but her sort of determined nature to kind of, not only save him, but also eventually, lead the galaxy into a new era. Things with Vader, wherein like, he always, no matter what task he is given, he is always determined to give, the absolute best effort he will always give, because order is all about what he, strives for, even if it's something he does not like. In fact, I even have a quote here that I would love to just sort of get into when he talks about sort of like, I think this sort of quote kind of summarizes his mentality. So Vader sighed and waved the picture off. This was such a convoluted business, all this spying and intrigue. True, he had learned the game. He played it well, as one must to live on this world, but he did not enjoy it. Men like Xizor and the Emperor took pleasure from their manipulations, but Vader always felt soiled when he mucked around in this double dealing and triple crossing. He was a warrior, and as such, he would prefer to plant himself in the path of an advancing army alone, to all this simple, excuse me, smiling to his face while plotting an enemy's ruin, which was the political. Give me the rest. Sorry, it's 2 pages. So,
No worries.
which was the political core of Imperial Center. Striking a man down with your blade was clean and honorable. Shooting him in the back from the darkness of an alley and hurrying to blame it on another was something else altogether. He turned away from the monitors. Yes, he could do it, and yes, it was necessary, but he still did not have to like it. Now, things like that says a lot in just a couple of paragraphs, because for one thing, from that, you instantly get what Vader's about. You understand his position within the Empire, you understand his capabilities, you understand his preferences, but you also understand his mindset at the necessity. He doesn't like the spy work, but he can do it better than most people. He prefers to stand in front of an army with his lightsaber, but he understands that in order to be a ruler of a galaxy, you have to do more than that. And I think that that sort of way of writing is really what I really enjoy about this book, because, again, you understand so much in just a relatively short amount of time. And that characterization, you remember it because you instantly understand from that dialogue alone, you understand what this character is about, even though it doesn't exactly tell you what this character is about. And things like that are what really stand out for me personally.
Yeah, see, I don't disagree with any of that. I think that the it's definitely a strength of the book in terms of like those micro encapsulations of the character. I mean, you don't ever read through this thinking that's, well, I say that. I'll hold on. There's a few exceptions to this, but generally speaking, you don't go through
I
this
think I
book.
know what you're going to mention.
Yeah, you don't go through this book thinking this. This is how character for this character. Well, what are they doing? This doesn't fit that archetype or that portrayal as we've seen in the trilogy, etc. He does a good job of showcasing the essence of each of the characters we've come to know and love from the films. Where I say it's more of a solid work as a character piece, because you do have to look at this as a character piece. If you look at it for like overarching story and the juiciness of the plot, it's not
basic.
going to deliver for you. It is just Star Wars action piece, generic stories you go through, well handled, but it's not the point.
Right.
So having said that, okay, you're expecting some kind of character journey, right? You're expecting some kind of narrative through line that's wrapping around one or more of the characters. You don't really get that. Everybody in this, with the minor exception of Rendar, and that's a bit all over the place as well. All of these characters are pretty static. You know, they come in at the start, they are who you know them to be, and at the end of the story, they're the same. You know, they've had
I
minor.
agree. There's not much evolution.
Yeah, and that's not by itself a massive flaw. I mean, these characters are largely realized by this point in the story, and we know what they're ultimately going to be from later works. But it's just there wasn't as much of like a connecting tissue of what we're seeing in the story, what we're seeing in terms of the plot, as playing out as to how it's going to affect them. You see little chips, you know, away at them as they kind of internally register reactions to things, but there aren't any real surprises. There aren't any real, you don't seem to feel like you're going on a journey with any of these characters on any kind of arc, even micro arcs within the kind of slices of story we've talked about at this point. That was a bit disappointing, given some of the things it kind of lines up early in the story. Like, for the main example being, of course, the slightly basically handled display of Luke struggling with the dark side, right? There's a few instances where you're seeing the anger kind of flourishing up in him and he's trying to tamp it down. And then from Vader's perspective, you're seeing him being aware that that's going to be an issue for him, and because of the introduction of it earlier in the film, you know, having seen that flare up personally in person, you can see him think, okay, that's going to be an issue. I can meld with that, I can interact with that, etc. Now, I'm glad they didn't encounter each other in the story. That would have been a bad choice. But it paints itself as though there's going to be some kind of overlap between Vader and Luke towards the tail end, and where Luke has to struggle with that dark side and overcome it, you know? And even if you take Vader out of the equation there and just have him deal with it in isolation, we don't ever see that kind of struggle come to bear. It sets up what's going to be happening, as you said, in the film, in the Return of the Jedi, but there is a distinct difference between the Luke we see in Empire and the Luke we see in Return. And if you're going to tell this particular story of the time between, that to me is the most interesting piece of that puzzle. And you see, you know, bits and pieces of it coming throughout. Like, you see the flare up of, oh, that's Return of the Jedi Luke. I'm seeing where he's coming from, you know, and not withstanding the obvious when he gets a wardrobe change and his costume, you know, his actual robes get given to him. Right. But I wanted to see more of like a bridge between those two characters, because there's an attempt here, but it's a bit hit and miss as to where, you know, he's registering this beat there, he's pointing out that factor there, but we're never seeing that journey that properly cements him going on and resolving to be that Jedi. And I think if I was going to suggest how you do that within the frame of the story we've been given, I would have used Rendar as that tool. I would have had Luke registering Rendar in his kind of Han capacity early in the story, seeing the journey that Rendar himself is going on in terms of struggling with that kind of hotshot buccaneer, swashbuckler type of character archetype, coming to that maturity aspect when he thinks what's happened with the Bothans, etc. Having some plot element introduced post that point to have the two kind of feeding into each other in terms of that maturity. Luke maybe even losing Dash earlier in that wrap up, so he kind of has the Bothan failure, dies then or dies soon after, perhaps dwelling in that darkness. And Luke kind of learning something from that, and it rapidly ages him in a way that we haven't seen before. Because you get early in the story that bit of oh my god, I could have died there, you know, which seemed way out of character, by the way. But, you know, it's tapping into that kind of low, baser instinct and then trying to bring it into the character and into the story. If he'd just taken all these ingredients and tied them all together better and made it part of the purpose of the overall book, I think that would have been, you know, the through line we needed to really sell this. Is like, okay, that was a Luke story, that was a Luke character piece, and all of the overall characters and archetypes present were enjoyable in their own way as well. You know, that was the thing that was missing for me. What do you think?
I think you're very much on the money. Like, I think it does feel like there's a bit of like a missing sort of character beat, or like a missing chapter where like Luke kind of comes into that, because like to your point about like him being afraid of dying, like we have a similar sequence towards the end when he's fighting Guri, and he kind of thinks to himself like, oh, I'm not afraid of dying. You know, I'm just going to trust the Force. It is what it is. And it's like that.
He has a few of those, actually. That thought comes up like a few times throughout the book. Is that, oh, yeah, the Force just kind of comes to me sometimes. Like, it never really did anything with it, you know? It was he was trying to get across the idea of forcing it as the problem.
There's something missing, because he goes from like, you know, the sort of like apprentice sort of mindset of like, oh, I'm still uncertain of how to like use my abilities, to, okay, like I'm a Jedi Knight, I'm comfortable with myself, the Force, you know, I am one with the Force is with me, sort of thing, which is fine, and it makes sense for what we see in Return of the Jedi. But I agree with you that, you know, I wouldn't say it feels completely missing, because, you know, we do, you know, when Dash is going through his kind of like post-traumatic stress sort of, feeling with what happened with the Bothans, Luke does recognize that,
Mm.
he feels compassion for him and he does kind of take those lessons to heart. So I wouldn't say it's completely absent, but we could have used more. Like
Yeah.
make the transition feel a bit smoother because it's like fantastic start, fantastic end, but the middle needs more kind of meat to kind of like make you fully buy it. I wouldn't say you don't buy it completely, but I agree with you that like it's pretty bare bones in comparison, and it makes it his development, I would say, feels the most abrupt out of anybody here because like kind of everyone else, their miniature plots and their sort of transitions into their episode 6 selves feels a bit more natural than it does with Luke. So yeah, I do agree it could have used a bit more.
And to be fair, they're more fully formed characters when we're introduced to them in the film anyway. Luke is the character who
Yeah.
is supposed to be going on that journey. He's the farm boy becoming a Jedi Knight, so that's part of it by design. And you do see him reaching for that within the story. And you see these beats where Luke's struggling with his own mortality. He's recognizing the difference between kind of trying to grasp and reach for the Force and for pun intended, force the issue. And just kind of letting it roll over him and accepting it as a more natural, waves of power and stuff, part of the natural world and the natural order. So you kind of see these themes and these kind of ideas are played with, but there's no kind of connecting plan behind it all. You don't get the sense that he sat down and thought, okay, we're gonna have this scene feed into that scene, feed into that scene. It's gonna build this bridge between the two versions of the character, the Luke from Empire and the Luke from Return. It just kind of, you see flares and mix and matched puzzle pieces of both types of the character coming out throughout the story, which again, that's viable as well. That's human, that's realistic. We don't all just in a clean upwards trajectory evolve into our grown selves. You do relapse, you do have moments where you flit out of character and stuff. That's perfectly normal and natural, but it wasn't that clearly wasn't what was happening here. That wasn't an intentional part of the writing, at least not to me. It didn't seem that way. It's just a bit of a tighter connecting line between all those pieces, and really focusing on that as the story, helping justify the heavy presence of Vader for the story as well would have been good, because that helps. He's obviously got a reason to be here aside from the fact that it's Star Wars. Of course, you want Vader there when you can,
Right.
but really, it could have just been Xizor on the other side, and that would have been fine as the antagonist kind of presence within the story. So having that element with Luke would have helped justify Vader's presence as well, more than just political rivalries within the Imperial factions.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those, if we had maybe had like an extra chapter, or maybe not solely dedicated to that, but just to kind of help with that bridge, it would have come across as a bit smoother. I mean, I do like the sort of revelation he has about the difference between trying to grasp the Force versus just letting it be a part of him, and that how the kind of like switch you see go off like behind his eyes when he kind of figures everything out, and the difference in the writing and how he like uses his abilities. And again, I go back to the Guri fight, which is I think is a pretty good example of that, when he kind of goes into the Force speed matrix sort of mode, when he's just going full instinct, and you sort of see the growth from that. That's all excellent. But what I would have done is maybe have him try something like that earlier in the book and have him fail because he hasn't
good
quite
example of it. Making that choice to go, okay, I'm going to set this up. I'm going to set this moment up by showing it fail earlier on. Exactly that kind of ingredient. Just taking little bits and pieces, playing with what he's already got, but just making them sharper, making them punchier, making them fit, together, rather than just feeling like these random kind of things he's thrown at the wall a bit. It's a really
that
good
would have
idea.
helped immensely. Yeah. So things like that. I would say Luke definitely suffers. He probably, ironically, he probably suffers the most from the character department out of like everyone here. Not that it's bad. It's just like he's missing a few bits that a few of the others got or already had. So that is definitely something worth pointing out. But he's still great enough as it is. But yeah, it definitely could have helped.
Who do you want to jump to next? Because I think we save Xizor for the last, because he's obviously the most complete.
Yeah, because he's kind of the big focal point.
Yeah. So which
Vader. I mean, Vader's kind of. Let's go with Vader, because he's kind of, again, he's the least. I would say he's the least developed. Aside from Luke. Granted, though, you do like from a perspective of 1996, like you do learn a lot more. Like we didn't really get a ton of POVs with Vader with a lot of the content that were out at the time. So seeing the his interactions, I was about to say, and his way
is this probably the most significant Vader POV story we had, short of what comes
at the
later?
time? I'd probably say so. I can't really think of much off the top of my. I mean, aside from like the novelizations of the films themselves, of
Hmm.
course. But aside from that, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. I mean, sure, you had like the Marvel comics and stuff, but that's very different. So I would say at the time, like this was probably the most extensive look we get at Vader slash Anakin that was out at the time. And again, like I said, like the a lot of the character beats, it is surprising to see how much here, maintained, leading into the prequels, even though like his backstory was largely unexplored. Him giving his all into a task, even though he hates it, him
Yeah,
preferring to
it's a good
the
example of
physical
one.
side of things, as opposed to the political, even though he is very skilled at it. Like those are all things that you can not only glean from the original trilogy, but would remain staples leading into the prequels, which granted does also, support the idea that Lucas had, his hand dipped into this in
Hmm.
a couple of ways. So it is very impressive. I mean, obviously, like we never get mention of things like, the Clone Wars or like him being a general or him, like living on Tatooine. Like, we don't get like a Dooku name drop or anything like that. But uh, it is surprising how well it holds up. And, him, character beats like him trying to heal himself with the Force and, the sort of dichotomy of
Yeah,
like, oh, I
that
can
that was the
breathe
strongest
again. But
part
then,
for
but then
me.
that relief like
Yeah,
causes the power to fade away. Like
absolutely. That was really
that's
strong.
incredible.
Yeah, that was the strongest he ever was for me in the story. That and not just I mean, completely agree with you. They've done a good job of capturing the character and the essence of him, and particularly as you say, the fact that we haven't seen POVs of this depth with him before. It's outside of the novelizations. But yeah, that was the strongest kind of story idea that I loved here. That theme of haha, the dark side can heal you, but the second you start getting any joy from it, straight away it goes, which means it's not sustainable by any stretch. You have to, if you want to be healed and
Mhm,
breathing, you have to hate and feel anger constantly and just seethe,
mhm.
which is no way to live. So it's that double-edged sword.
It also like further reinforces his desperation to bring Luke to his side, because he
Mm.
sort of figures like, oh, with our powers combined I could sustain this indefinitely, which I mean, if anything, I mean, it's obviously this was not intentional at the time, but it's like it is interesting sort of juxtaposition to how, like, having recently gone through the Plagueis chapters, like that was Plagueis's plan from the
Yeah,
get-go, like him and
basically.
Sidious using combining their powers to keep themselves alive forever. And it's like, obviously that wasn't a thought process that Steve Perry probably had back then, but
Yeah, no,
the
but it's
fact that
same
you can
idea
sort
though,
of
same
have that
concept.
parallel is interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
it stems from that same pure root of, okay, how can we make the dark side interesting? How can we make the concept of
Mhm,
this evil force that's being drawn on? How can we play with that thematically? How can we use the narrative and make it, okay, this is a tragedy, but also it's kind of a lot of Schadenfreude here. That this is we want to see our evil sorcerers and dark side users suffer for their choices, but in a way that's compelling from like a human level. It makes perfect sense that he wants to
mhm.
be free of this prison of a suit that he seems. A lot of stories do a good job of capturing that. The fact that this isn't just a guy wearing armor. This is him, held into this prison.
Horrible
Um,
experience. Yeah,
yeah,
to say the least.
absolutely. And just feeling the sense of that. Okay, you have to turn to the light if you want to heal yourself. And if you can't heal yourself spiritually, you can't heal yourself physically. And the best the dark side can do is give you like that temporary boon, forcing the
Mhm.
issue. Yeah, I just
But
thought that was a very strong choice. And again, like you said, it gives that extra selfish reason for why he's driven to get Luke beyond just the natural stuff. Oh, he's my son. There's obviously a lot of human aspects that just drive you towards it anyway. But having that, you're the key to my healing, without it ever being so
salvation, yeah.
basic and explicitly stated as purely that. It's not just like a moha mustache twirling moment. I'm going to get the ingredient that saves me. It's just it's
Mhm.
another layer of texture on top of everything else about the relationship. So I thought it was really smart and well handled.
I Yeah, another character beat from Vader I really appreciate is when he's like fighting those dueling droids, and it's like the descriptor, it's like they spent a good deal of time just telling you how badass and formidable these dueling droids are, and then
Mm.
Vader's just casually just ripping them apart with like barely any effort, and he's just bored by the whole thing. But he also notes that his shoulder was feeling better, and
Mm.
that sort of thrill that he was getting because from that fight, because even though you have these droids who aren't even a challenge to him, but his son, managed to score one hit, which is something he hasn't really experienced in a while. And that sort of thrill, kind of really, it invigorates him in a way. And it kind of gives him more purpose. And I think Steve Perry's like his descriptive style when he's like showing you the differences between the energies of the light and the darkness is really it goes a long way towards highlighting the fact that yes, these are two things from the same source, but they're manifesting in very different ways. Vader is like grasping it, trying to hold on to it, whereas Luke, by the end is just letting it be a part of him, and he's able to do this. Vader, while doing that, is able to do this, and that's part of, I think the writing is very strong in that, because you do get the sense of like, okay, like they're going about these different ways, but they're still able to accomplish somewhat similar things, which is, again, I know that sounds like a very basic criticism, but some authors do fail at differentiating the two
Yeah,
entities.
no,
So
absolutely.
I do appreciate that.
But also, it's basic in the sense of this is magical power and how it's being used, etc. But it's in terms of the theming, it's so integral and so that's where all the depth is to the Star Wars, as an art form. I mean, you raised the most important ingredient there, the fact that when he was hit on the shoulder, that's obviously that's a nod to the continuity of the films, that happened in the films. Oh yeah, we remember that moment. We remember when he did that. That's on that very surface level, that's worth noting just by itself. But then he plays into it. It's the frustration of, I was hit, but also that I'm proud as a dad. My son got that strike on. Even so young in his Jedi career, he managed to pull it off. He's got a lot of pride there. He kind of taps into that energy as on a human level, which is quite good. But also, and this is again where I wish we'd seen more of this, because you're exactly right. Having that Vader grasping and tearing and ripping at the Force and holding it close and trying to strangle it into submission, seeing more of that in direct contrast to Luke and his approach. If we just had that stronger through line all the way through the story to show Luke on the journey himself, independent of any other influence, just himself learning that accepting the Force as as an external force as part of me and trusting in it, etc. That giving me this strength and this power, having him that being more of a focus in direct contrast to Vader's own journey, I think that would have really added Dark Rendezvous, the theming connections between Yoda and Dooku, the confusion of how the Force works, or the conflicting spirituality choices they're making as characters. Just that level of overlapping and overlaid theming, it just all throughout this would have really elevated this for me, because it's there. You're right, like the beats are there. He's making that choice, but it's not.
We just wish there was more of it.
Yeah, it's just not tied as neatly together as it could be. So yeah, it's just something I wanted to flag. But yeah, you hit all the high beats there, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, just one final point before we move on. It's like I do like how they use Sidious as kind of a frame for the nth degree of what the dark side could do, because it's often brought up when Vader is like channeling this energy to try and heal himself, that Sidious had let the dark side just eat away at him, turned into what he is. I like how Vader is like, well, it's not gonna happen to me, I'm gonna master this, I'm gonna make this work. And even though he ultimately fails, he does improve. He goes from 1 minute to 2 minutes, and he thinks to himself okay, soon it will be 10, then it'll be an hour, and then it'll be indefinitely. I am the Dark Lord. I will make this work. So the fact that yes, he is failing, but at the same time he's making progress in his own way. It also helps to set up his unwillingness to immediately accept the light in Return of the Jedi. When we get the Endor scene, of course, the fact that okay, he has these doubts. There is still a flicker in him of light that he acknowledges, but it's not just, it's buried so deep that when you see him again, when you see him again, Return of the Jedi, this isn't going to be an instant thing. And again, little character beats like that, I do appreciate from an overall franchise perspective.
And it helps set up the dynamic with the Emperor as well. Like you see in this that he is mostly submissive to the Emperor's will, but at the same time, in his mind, it's never alluded to. Like he never specifically says, or never stated rather, it never specifically says that he's going to supplant the Emperor. But in his mind, his trajectory does not include the Emperor in the distant future. Once he's got Luke, once he's got this situation,
it could just never work any other way.
Exactly. And it really helps kind of lean into that idea and set up what's ultimately going to happen with the final film without it ever having to be beating you over the head with it. But yeah, that was all I really wanted to talk about with Vader. I think it was a strong encapsulation, a very good first kind of introduction to his POV. I mean, obviously it's happened before that at this point, but just as in depth as it is here. But yeah, all the depth, again, it could have been tied better to Luke more, but aside from that, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Despite being one of the first, it is still very strong even to this day, even though it definitely could be improved. Do we want to talk about Leia next?
Yeah, Leia was. It's less about her characterization and more the various things that happened throughout the story that I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
I feel
it's a bit dated in terms of what the story choices made.
I like some of the things they do with her. It's just, for me, my only complaint is I wish she felt a little particularly like in the latter portions, she was very reactive.
Mm.
And not that she didn't have any agency, because she definitely did. I mean, like I liked the things at like the casino when she's talking to like Greedo's,
Yes.
uncle and all that. Like
That was probably my
her
favorite part of
taking
the book
charge,
for her.
taking that
Yeah.
agency, taking the plans, like that was all fantastic. I just wish we kind of had more of that energy, leading into the latter half, because she did kind of just turn into I hate being so harsh, but it's like, okay, like we need to save,
The
save
princess
her at
from
the
the
castle
castle.
now.
Yeah, exactly. So
Kind
it's
of like,
literally, but also the worst part for me is she put herself there. There was never going to
yeah.
be anything gained by going into that situation. I mean, what power did she think she was going to have? I mean, this was a terrible idea. Just the fact that
Which
Chewie
Chewie even calls
escaped.
her out on, which
Yeah,
which
and also
doesn't.
him even escape. Like, okay, here's what we do, and then what she's saying is just run away. I'll stay here. You bring backup. Like, what backup can he bring? He can bring like 3 guys. This was a terrible, stupid plan, and she's much smarter than this. I mean, it pays credit to that throughout the story. She's flagging the flaws in Luke's terrible plans. It's like, this is a really bad
Yeah,
idea, and it's like, well, what else have we got? And she's like,
you're coming across a
okay,
little
fair, but
hypocritical here, Leia. Yeah.
yeah, like it was very heavily handed in just the sense of, okay, we need to get her involved. We need to get them we need to somehow bring these characters to a head with the protagonists against Xizor, Xizor, etc. But yeah, it just to me, I was like, this whole thing is silly, and obviously tie it into the fact that you've got Xizor being who he is with the pheromones and everything. It's like, oh, I mean, this is just, like you said, it's the reactivity. It's just, well, it's uncomfortable apart from anything else because of the squeakiness of the situation, obviously. But even putting that aside, in a better story, you could handle that well. But she's just going into full reactive mode at that point. As soon as she enters into that castle, she just ends up being the person who needs to be saved, and kind of falls into that Leia in the Death Star role. Which is,
Right.
she's at this point, she's more than that as a character. And we see it, like I said, the casino is a perfect example. That was the balance done best for me. She was a bit full-throated earlier in the story, and she was completely passive in the latter section. But that middle ground was, okay, this is the character of Leia being Leia. She's kind of exasperated at the rambunctiousness of Chewie and Lando as gamblers. She's kind of resting on laws, and doesn't enjoy just sitting around waiting for this organization to turn up and have a meeting with her, etc. When she does know they're coming, she gets everything ready with a scanner. They're using resources. Yeah. She's currently in charge,
taking that agency.
Yeah, it's just outside of that middle section of the book, she just felt like she didn't need to be there. She didn't have any real story function. When really the whole thing of trying to rescue Han is, she's the person who should be taking point on that. She in terms of like the narrative, the focus should be, she wants to get Han back. In a way, I mean, all they all do, obviously, but she's the one who's most driven on that, with the exception of Chewbacca, who's more of a secondary character anyway. It felt like they didn't. I keep saying they. It's not a group project. He, as an author, didn't kind of have enough for her to kind of really do throughout the story. I mean, it shifted around a bit. And add on to that everything with Xizor and the weirdness involved. It's like, this is,
but it's like,
we can do better than this.
Yeah, I mean, but it's all the more frustrating because the first half does her pretty spot on. Again, I can't agree with you more about the casino scene. The fact that she has that agency, the fact that I actually bought her as a diplomat in this, like her sort of negotiating, the fact that she kind of takes all these steps ahead of time, even like with Guri and like setting up the scanner and that, the fact that she would take that extra step, the sleeping potion, which like, even though that fails, but like she didn't, like, that's hardly her fault. She couldn't possibly know what Guri was at that time, so I can forgive her that mistake. But again, the fact that she's taking those steps, taking that initiative, going along with the plans, the fact that she's put off by Dash's sort of brashness, but at the same time can appreciate his skills as a pilot and as a fighter, all of that is fantastic. That is Leia, to a T. I just wish she stayed that way for the rest of the book. That's my major frustration. And again, since we're gonna see her again in Return of arrives in the bounty hunter getup to rescue him, she frees him from the carbonite, like literally, like this is, we're gonna see her take charge in that. So the fact that it starts off so strong with her and then just kind of tapers out it's unfortunate. And I get it, like there is a plot reason for it, Xizor doing what Xizor does. Like I understand all of that. It's just, again, I would have preferred less reactivity and more just I don't want to say she wasn't passive. Like, she was never passive.
Yeah, no,
But
it's yeah. I was the wrong
there
word to
was
use when I said that, but
there was
just
more.
too passive for her as a character. You know, other characters could be.
Exactly.
You could afford to be that way with others, but not Leia. Leia needs. She loses too much of who she is as a character if she is in any way recognizable in that direction. I mean,
Mhm.
the
I mean,
amount
the
of
scene where she like
time.
freaking kicks Xizor in the groin
Yeah,
is just like that.
exactly. But past that point, you don't see her then carrying on upward trajectory. You know, having her plateau a bit and fall into that lull with Shizor's, powers. You know that. I mean, it's you don't really want to read it, and it's weird. But as a story choice, you can sit there. But we don't ever see her kind of move past that point. It's just from that stage
She
on,
doesn't come
she's
back
just
from it.
she's just
Yeah.
there in the story and doesn't do much. You know, there's no big win. You know, Lando, for example, blowing at the base, which I don't want to deprive from Lando. That's a great Lando moment, but that could have been her, for example. Just something of that scale that justifies her presence within the story at that stage. Because at that point, she's just there to be saved. And again, that's fine. It's not like that's a problem. Just because she's a woman, you can't save her in the story. That's not the problem. It's the fact that she's this character who this has happened this way before for a few times at this stage, and also doesn't do anything past that point. You know, she's not flying the Falcon. She's only one of two gunners in the Falcon. She's not making tactical decisions in the space battle, etc. She's not saving Rendar or anything like that. She needed more to do past that point. And also, I mentioned the fact that she was a bit full-throated in the first part of the story. There's a bit of a heavy-handedness to the whole men will be men aspect to Leia, which is absolutely an ingredient that needs to be there. Don't get me wrong, that's not a problem. But it happens quite a bit in the first half of the story. Like, it comes up as though she hasn't got. Yeah, she doesn't have enough other thoughts. It stands out in a way that it shouldn't. By the point until you get to that middle grade where she's kind of okay. Now we have things to do with her in the story. Up to that point, she's just kind of rolling her eyes at the guys, which is again fine, but just goes on a bit too long for me. We need to see more of what she's feeling.
Yeah, like there's this one. I do like the sequence where she describes Lando as like, he was endearing for a rogue. Like little character beats like that,
little bits like that are fine. Yeah, little dips, and she can.
We got more.
Yeah, just the outright eye rolls and boys will be boys moments. That's completely fine. Like that's true to her character as what we see in the films. But it's just the first third of the book, from memory, it comes up quite a lot. Like there's a few different scenes where she's like, like men, that kind of thing. We needed more to kind of split those up. I think to kind of dilute it a bit and make it a bit more well rounded. Just because that's not who she is entirely as a character. Particularly at this stage in the story trajectory. So yeah, that was just what I wanted to mention with her.
No, it's all good. I think that covers it pretty well. Lando is Lando.
Sorry. 1 second. No, the other thing as well, Luke and the weirdness with Han, and that he did not need to dive into that. Yeah. It's okay to hand wave that, guys. You don't need to sit and make the triangle feel like it's anything more than it is. We knew what happened at this stage. Every time she's like, but I like Luke as well.
A little too much.
No, you don't. It's so weird.
No. It comes off too. The fact that they keep doing that, it's very.
It's like 4 or 5 times in this book. I think it comes up a lot.
It's very awkward, and it's like you could almost feel like. I mean, maybe this. I don't know if Steve Perry intended this, but it almost felt like a little too tongue in cheek. Like, get it, get it, because it can happen.
Exactly, because we get it. Yeah, we know it was really creepy and weird, but they didn't know that story decision at the time. So let's just move on and forget about it. And yes. Yeah, realistically, it makes sense that they have this dynamic.
Something like Splinter of the Mind's Eye, like where the author legitimately didn't know that was coming because that was written, before even Empire came out. So it's like that's different. That's its own can of worms. And if we ever get to that book, we'll see. But it's not quite that bad. But it's very awkward. It's uncomfortable, and
it was just unnecessary. It added nothing. It deals with nothing. No one wants it. Just hand wave it and forget it happened and don't ever address it. Like, we don't expect, because yes, it's true. These characters at this point in the story, they would be feeling the way they feel, and it's fine. It completely gels, in terms of what they're going on in their own world. But we, as outsiders reading it, know that it can never happen for the reasons we know, and it just we don't need to see. It's just weird. No one needs that. Yeah. If anyone can make a choice to delete that scene in Empire, they would do it. That should be something that
absolutely.
Cut. But yeah,
100%. It comes off too much. Like once is whatever, but the fact that they do it like 4 or 5 times, it's just awkward. It's too much. It comes off as like too tongue in cheek, and like if I could remove any part of this book, I would definitely be that.
Yeah, for sure. But you wanted to go into Lando.
Lando is Lando, and he is a gem of a character, as he always is. He's written so on point. Everything from his from his dialogue to his actions. You know, he can't the scene where he tries to cook for them and he gets offended by them
Quite
not wanting
rightly,
it. And
if I do say so myself. Yes, it looks like ass, but he's just gone through an hour of cooking. Have some respect. At least pretend to try it. Do an Aragorn, you know? Just go and just slosh it. You know, it's fine.
I know, it's brilliant.
But I
when
love that he
tries
backed
it,
down as well. I love that he's like, okay, you know, they ride the grumpy humor line with Lando in particular very well for this book, because obviously his suave, generally just humorous lines are excellent by themselves. But that's kind of I mean, it's not easy to do. That's the wrong word, but it's more run of the mill. You see that in other stories, but the kind of the grumpy factor is done really well in this. Like when he's like, "It's not my fault," and like, "Damn Han," and his changes to the ship and all that stuff.
And it helps also with Dash too, the dynamic that because you have Dash who's like a younger Han, and then you like
the
he tries to like, you know, yeah, but I also love that there's that competitiveness, but he doesn't like it's ribbing. He doesn't let it like get to him super personally. Like when Dash is like, "Oh, I think you're getting old, Calrissian," and then he instantly responds with, "Yeah, and I want to get older, so let's do it."
Exactly. He's not. It's not like playing it. Oh, what's his foil for this? Oh, he has to get over the fact that he's aging. Let's make it a character foil. No, we don't need any of that. It's just it's water off a duck's back, you know, as it should be with Lando. They absolutely perfectly nailed the character for me. And the utility as well. The fact that, you know, he's delving into his gambling habits because of course he is. He's a gambler. He's in one of the best casinos that he knows. You know, why wouldn't he? And Leia's kind of like, oh, go on then, have fun. Same with Chewbacca, you know. But then the fact that becomes exactly how he wins so well, spending the time in it, living in the scene. They spend a good long time just being in that casino. You know, you didn't when they mentioned that it's going to be like a week even after they get their meeting, you know, and then it goes a bit longer. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting story choice, because normally you just kind of cut to the scene at that point. You know, cut to the meeting, or the setup for the meeting, rather, in which case, you know, with everything with the scan that was planned. But the fact that they just have to spend time there, and that's realistic, that's true to life. And instead of just having it be done for the sake of world building,
a lot of time passes in this book.
Yes, yeah, and instead of just being done for the sake of world building, well, that would happen, therefore it does. He uses that time. You know, he uses that time to squeeze out character moments to set up the fact that resource-wise, this explains how they can afford the expensive scanner, because he's just won lots of winnings in the casino. All of this time. I mean, it's probably my favorite part of the book, to be honest. The casino, it's certainly up there.
It's definitely one of the really character beats, and I also like I like that they use C-3PO as like the contrasting him while he's playing the cards, because like he's a droid, he's thinking about this like clinically, like from an odds perspective, like why is he like there's no way he could win, like why is he doing this, and then having Leia again showing her like, you know, diplomatic, you know, sort of understanding of people, kind of explains to 3PO, oh, like, you know, he's bluffing by doing this, and that has this effect, and that's why he's able to win. I mean, I really love that, because that's like character on 3 levels. You get Lando's proclivities, you get, you know, C-3PO obviously being, you know, he's a droid. I mean, he's being clinical. Like a droid would look at gambling in the purest mathematical form and not understand things like bluffing and so on and so forth. And then you get Leia, who's like the bridge between those two worlds, which again, little character beats there. Fantastic.
I love the note where Lando's like, "You're the biggest gambler I know." You know, he's talking to Leia. You just don't gamble with money; you gamble with your life. You know, the little touches like that. Like, he really, really well utilized this time spent at the casino area, and made it interesting as well. Little touches like the fact I meant to mention it when we talked about Leia. She speaks Rhodian reasonably well. Like she speaks a lot of languages, because Rhodian is not like a particularly essential one to have in the bank, and yet she has it. You know, so. I mean, it's one of even 3 languages we know she reads in this. Or no, she speaks.
Well, yeah, because like what's the species of the bounty hunter?
I can't remember, but that was the other one that's alluded to, wasn't it? I think possibly one
more. It also confirms that scene in Return of the Jedi was not like a recording. She was saying that.
Yes,
you know, I'm just saying like little beats, because you don't necessarily know for sure, because it has like that robotic tint. So you were thinking, oh, maybe that was like a machine recorded lines. Like no, that's just her speaking through a you know the helmet, which is interesting, because we didn't necessarily know that.
Yeah. It'd be weird to see her voicing it without the mask as well. That sounds like a very difficult one to vocalize without that modulator. But yeah,
absolutely. But like the fact that she would know multiple, again, makes perfect sense. She was a senator in the you know I almost said Republic Senate, Imperial Senate, or at least, well, I mean that doesn't even exist anymore at this point in the timeline. But still, so yeah, it makes perfect sense. So again, all well and good there. yeah, do you have anything more we want to say about? Because Lando's just, I mean, he's perfect. I mean, I
Yeah,
really don't have
he's
too much to
Lando.
say.
You know, he's Lando.
Yeah.
I think the main thing for me was it wasn't just the fact that he got the character well, perfectly executed. He used him well. It was well utilized throughout the story, throughout the plot. He was absolutely hilarious all the way through. He gels
Those of
off.
Xizor's cast at the end.
Yeah,
which,
exactly. Yeah, I
like
mean,
you're
yeah, he's the one who does that. It just casually is like, whoops, just wipes out an entire criminal syndicate on the Capitol just with one grenade. It's hilarious. But
which
yeah,
could kill him. He doesn't necessarily know that. Again, gambling with your life.
yeah, exactly.
That's Lando.
It's not just about him as a humorous character, as utility throughout the plot, but also jiving off other characters. You see him bouncing off all of the other members of the team and the different dynamics they have.
Yeah.
It's all fantastic.
And for a book that delves so heavily into the criminal element, it makes sense that Lando would be someone who would really be heavily involved with these connections because he knows people. Like he knows where the seedy places are. He knows who to talk to get this information. He knows what to do in order to, make deals. Him when they're going back and forth, like the money with the going through the sewer, like his sort of haggling mindset. That all makes sense. That in these specific settings. So it's he's not just there for the sake of it. He serves a purpose both in character and in just general plot relevance.
Yeah, really nailed him. Really enjoyed him. Probably definitely my favorite character in the book. No question for me. Maybe I'm just a massive Lando fan now. Maybe that's just a change in me because every book we talk about, I'm like, oh, I love Lando. I never was growing up that much. It just
maybe we'll get into the Lando books one of these days, even though they are notoriously strange.
Good. They are not good. From reputation alone, I've heard that one. But yeah,
who knows? Maybe we'll see. Chewie's Chewie.
Droids are the droids. Particularly funny, I think, in this book.
C-3PO driving the Falcon is hilarious.
Timeless classic. Yeah.
Like flying, not driving.
Yeah, brilliant. Loved it. Cheesy as hell, but hilarious nonetheless. Same with Chewie, well executed. I agree with you in the terms of the audiobook delivery wasn't the best, but it's hard to do a Chewie impression, so we'll let him.
I'm not going to rag on him for that. Him being good at gambling because people are afraid of him is a good callback to A New Hope when he's playing, the game with
the Wookiee
C-3PO. Yeah. Although I do like that they established that that's not really something that Wookiees would just do at the drop of a hat, but it's good. It's good to have your opponent think that.
Yeah.
Again, little touches like that I appreciate.
3PO, again, for that gambling sequence was one of the best parts of the book. 3PO was on point there as well. He had a lot of good character moments, a lot of good discussions. He offered more to this than just being there because the originals had him there. A lot of stories, I feel, 3PO in particular, and R2 to an extent, but it's lesser presence anyway. But 3PO is just there because he has to be. I don't think many writers really have anything interesting to do with the character. If you had to cut one character, it'd basically always be 3PO, in my opinion. I don't think you'd struggle to find people who would disagree with that, in my opinion. But yeah,
that's actually one of the few complaints I have with the Yuuzhan Vong War is 3PO and R2D2 might as well not even have been there. They basically do nothing. And I get it. It's an enormous story with a ton of characters. I get that there's going to be some suffering there, and they're the easiest to cut. But it's it is something worth pointing out because they just kind of become incidental after a certain point, which is kind of unfortunate because they are good characters. So
it's just saying what they can offer in terms of utility to the team for one is a lot more restricted. R2 is more of a supplementary piece. You can put him with a lot of situations, and he will just make it more viable. C-3PO. Yeah, exactly. 3PO tends to be like, oh, I've got to lug him around. He's slow. He can't fight. He can't. It's not really. It's not much of an enabler or a force multiplier, as it were, narratively speaking. So I understand why that happens. But yeah, this book handled him well. Did a really good job with him.
Yeah. Do we want to? There's really not much to say about Palpatine. He's not really in the book.
Yeah,
much.
Palpatine's. That's just
he's more of a plot device than anything. He's fine. And he's just not much. This actually, we were talking about Vader POV.
Sorry, just on the Palpatine points, it wasn't his plan. The Death Star trap wasn't his idea. That's a weird addition to put into this, and just having it be I wouldn't say some random criminal. It was one of the arch criminals, but still, that being Xizor's idea is a very interesting story choice. The fact that it wasn't everything that went wrong with that part of the Return of the Jedi, with the fact that the whole trap backfired and got him killed, it wasn't even his idea. So yeah, that's what do you think of that?
I'm of two minds about it. For one thing, you don't get the impression in Return of the Jedi that was the case. He does like it was I who let the information get. So you don't really get that. But at the same time, I guess in retrospective, it does make Palpatine seem more competent because, yeah, why would he let this leak when the Death Star isn't even sorry, the second Death Star isn't even fully built at this point? Tactically, that never made much sense. So I'm again, for me, it's one of those things like I can take it or leave it. I think on the one hand, it does change what's kind of implied, but at the other hand, it doesn't really change anything in the story of Return of the Jedi for the worse, in my opinion. So I'm kind of neutral. What about you?
Yeah, it's no big thing by any means. I mean, just ignore it if you don't like it. So it's hardly changed much at all. But yeah, I mean, it makes it more realistic in the fact that there's more pieces on the board involving it. More chaos that he has having to work around. It plays into the fact of him as a schemer. It was a scheme too far kind of situation. But at the same time, it not being his original idea undermines a little bit of the self-fulfilling prophecy element. The fact that he was the one who ultimately brought the rebellion together to destroy him. Similar to the similar kind of concept of what they play with the Force Unleashed book stories when he was literally creating the rebellion that would ultimately destroy him. That was a bit on the nose for me, but it's still a concept that I find engaging, and this is kind of like a smaller version of that. He was bringing them together. So yeah, I take it or leave it. Again, like you, I'm not too fussed either way. I think what I would have liked is to have it show it wasn't an active decision from the start, because in this it is still he's deciding to let it happen. I would have liked it.
Yeah, he runs with it.
Yeah, I would have liked. Yeah, that's the ingredient I would have changed. I would have had it be that the Alliance or even Xizor or someone just took it out of his hands, and the actual plans initially being stolen was not something he decided. And then he threw the scheme on top. He took the information, he took the wild card, and went, okay,
which for him would make sense.
Yeah, exactly. running with it, flying by the seat of his pants, etc., and making it work to his favor. That's how I would have played it. And this book sort of opens the door to that, but never really steps through it. It just ultimately ends up being Xizor's plan, and it was all intentional from the start. But yeah, that's
we don't really. I will say this too, like to our point about Vader earlier, this might very well be one of the first POVs we ever get for Sidious, just like chronologically in terms of really. I mean, we don't get many POVs with him. I think we only get like maybe one or two of significance, but it is interesting. It's an exploration of a character who at the time really didn't have, much backstory going for him. And, again, the fact that it is
POV with him, sorry? I thought it was always Xizor or Vader, but.
Well, at the very beginning, very, very beginning, we have him. They replay the sequence from Empire Strikes Back when Vader's talking to the hologram.
Yes, yeah.
I thought we got a POV with him. I could be wrong about that though.
It was a lot of story in a very short space of time for me, so I may just be blanking on that. But I thought they were always showing from Vader or Xizor's perspective. But if I'm wrong,
you might be right.
Let us know in the comments down below if you've read it recently. We should remember, considering it was just this week. But
I think I might be wrong though. I think you're right, Callan.
But having said that, you're right though in that he may as well have been his POV, because you're still diving into his thought process and what he's doing through the lens of Xizor and Vader, even if I am right there. So yeah, you're right. It's the deepest dive we get outside of the films up to this point. And I think it does a good job. It's Palpatine. Palpatine. It's never going to be particularly deep. But yeah, he's handled it well.
It's consistent with what we see in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I said about that, I guess.
Do we want to do, before we get into Xizor and Guri, do we want to talk about Dash?
Yeah, Dash is the main one to do next, I think.
I never played the video game, honestly, that he's like the Shadows of the Empire game. He is like the main character in that game. I never played it, so this was my first introduction to the character and really my main introduction. He's fine for what he is. I do like the fact that they set up him in a very specific way where you think he's just going to be this arrogant prick and he's never going to change.
Which he is, to be fair.
Yes, he most definitely is. But the thing with the Bothans, that happens, and the fact that has such an effect on him, like Luke even refers to it, like, first of all, the fact that he says like he had seen this before, battle shock. First of all, I like the fact that they acknowledged that Luke has seen this before, because he's a rebel. He's been a rebel for years now. It makes sense that he would. He's been a part of a lot of big battles. He's able to recognize it, and the fact that it hits him the way that it does, and it makes sense because he's so confident in himself and his abilities. The fact that he, made that mistake, or at least what we were led to assume initially was a mistake. I mean, it still kind of was, I guess, depending on how you look at it. But the fact that that has such an effect on him, for me anyway, I really bought, his journey. The fact that he was so affected, but the fact that he's experienced enough to where by the end he's like come to terms with it. I just can't take this lying down. The Empire hurt me. I'm going to help you guys, even though it's not necessarily what I want. he's a very simple character in this book, but I do like the journey he goes on for what it is, because they could have easily just made it where he had no arc whatsoever, and you basically would have had the same conclusion. But I do like the fact that he has that arc, and Luke's reaction to him, like he said, could have been a pretty good setup for his development that we wish, we both wish he got more of. But for what it is, he's fine.
Yeah, it's kind of the same sort of situation with Luke for me with Rendar. I enjoyed the character presence all throughout, but at the same time, there never felt like there was a particular journey for him. And it didn't need to, like you said. It could have just been a flat static character and just the classic archetype of Han kind of filling in, and that's it. Nothing really changes. But he did enough early in the story where you think it's setting up some kind of journey for him. You know, when he's talking about the past with his family and his relation to the hatred of the Empire, etc. The fact that he was involved in the Battle of Hoth. You know, there seems to be more to this.
I know that I've never played the game, but I know that's a mission in the game. Where
yes,
he's on Hoth,
yeah,
so
it's really cleverly tied together, and you know, all of that. It's brilliant. But it's it feels like it's setting up this journey that he's going to be going on. It feels like it's going to play into that connection with the Empire. It feels like it's going to play into the fact that once he's had that situation at the bottom, there's going to be something more of that. It feels like if he'd been a POV character, so that we could see what he's thinking when he's not, overlapping with the main team, and when he's having his quiet moments to himself, talking, just jamming with his droid, etc. We could have seen a bit of that journey and seen kind of where he was supposed to be going. Couple that with the fact that at the very end, obviously, when you have the Bothan situation, where we get to enjoy the fact that he's having a character reaction to that. It's obviously tragic and sad, but it's good to see that kind of development there, that transition from
it's a big juxtaposition to what we've seen up until this
exactly
point.
Yeah, you see, oh, something's going to happen there, but then he just fades off the story, comes back, and is completely fine. He's back. I like what he says about getting back on the horse, because it's absolutely right, and I like the way it's framed within the context of Star Wars, but it's just, we missed all of that development. We missed that journey you've gone on. It's happened off page.
Right.
And again, that would be fine as well if it then did something after that, like you see him stumbling or struggling, or you're seeing him being less cocksure. But he's just gone straight back to the way he was before. There's no change there. So it just feels like the ingredients are here, but they're not fusing together. They're not coming together as like an overall arc or character piece. It's just like it feels like you need another book after this to catch up and really dive into this guy. Coupled with the fact that, of course, that he dies in the end, or does he?
Actually, he doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. We know from outside of the story he doesn't, but that's not touched on in this book. So as far as anyone who just reads this book is aware, he's dead, and in the weirdest, just not Star Warsy way ever. Like if that was just a tertiary or quaternary character, that'd be one thing. But he's a heavy presence in this story, and it's just gone. Just got hit by a bit of debris.
Which I guess is realistic, but it's so strange.
Yeah, you can make those kind of choices, but it needs to be better timed, especially in a Star Wars style.
I agree, and I honestly would have preferred him to have joined the rebellion by the end of it. I think I would have liked it if his journey had come like if he had been like, you know what, after all this, I'm done being the lone wolf. I'm gonna join you guys. Screw the Empire. Let's do this sort of thing. But yeah, like the fact that like, even though he does survive this, he doesn't really, like, as far as I know anyway, he doesn't really go on to do too much. I think he just kind of lays low for the rest of his days, kind of helps out in the smuggling ring here and there. Shame, because I feel like he's a character with a lot of potential. And for the record, like, I'm sure the game flushes him out quite a bit. And like anyone who's played the game can comment on this. Like if any of our complaints are addressed by the game, please let us know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure some of it is, but yeah, it's just kind of, I like him for what he is. I like some of the breadcrumbs they kind of, sprinkled, breadcrumbs or like seeds, whatever you want to call it, that they kind of did with him. I just wish there was more, because I feel like he has a lot of character potential in the terms of, becoming comfortable with himself and him sort of ultimately deciding to do the right thing. Again, bits of it are there. I just wish we got more. Yeah. It's kind of a shame.
Completely agreed. And particularly because he dies at the end of this. So it's just cut off. He comes in and out. He's a bit, very realistically, I enjoy him as a character presence, as we've said. It's really fun. But in terms of what he actually, exactly. A lot. But in terms of what he actually accomplishes within the story, he's only there to be the Deus Ex that gets people out of the crises. He turns up. Obviously it's fine. The first portion of the book, I think, is well utilized there with the swoop bike and deception and everything like that. But then you get to the very end on Coruscant, like what? Why is he there? How does he know to get there? How did he get there fast enough? How did he track them? How did he know
Right.
exactly where they're going to turn up and exactly the moment? Like it's very much just a Deus Ex
Lando
Machina,
even asks him
a
like, "How
Dash
do you
Ex
know they were
Machina.
there?" And he was like, "I know people." It's like,
Yeah, well, and it was kind of funny
little
because it
more
played
than
in the fact
that.
that Lando was making up like, oh yeah, I'm just, I know my stuff, right? This is just, this guy, this is, of course, this is where we need to go. And then Dash plays it off as, oh yeah, everybody knows about this. Of course they're here, so it's kind of played as a joke, but it still is the fact that he's just turned up and exactly out of nowhere, and it keeps happening. Like every single situation in the story, or pretty much every single one anyway, someone will turn up to save the day at the last minute, even when it's unbelievable, particularly in the tail end. There's some fun moments with it with Luke and Lando, obviously, but when that happens there. But with Dash here on Coruscant, or Imperial Center, which is a stupid name, by the way. Terrible idea, Emperor. That was dumb. Or in particular, Rogue Squadron. Rogue Squadron turning up in the orbit of Coruscant to rescue Luke and what? I mean, how did you know? How did you scramble in time? Why are you risking this mission? You're an extremely vital rebellion asset, and you're turning up in like the one place you are guaranteed to get wiped out in an instant.
Like quite literally the belly of the beast.
Yeah, this is nuts. There'd be thousands of TIE fighters defending the capital, and you are 12. In fact, you're 11 because one of them died earlier. So this, in fact, possibly even 10 because one was also damaged earlier if you haven't had time to repair. So it's just, this is absolutely crazy. It's purely trying to capture that kind of Star Wars moment of Yahoo, turning the last moment. I mean, yeah, I found that a bit weak for me. Sorry, didn't mean to go on to a tirade.
It's fun, right? It's fun, as it is. But like when you start to really think about it, like, wait, this does not make sense. And it's a classic. Hey, we need an exciting climax. Let's do this sort of thing, which is like, I mean, again, it's a staple, but doesn't make it good necessarily. So
one or two is fine, but it does it like 5 or 6 times. It keeps happening as a style choice. So that was the only reason I had an issue with it.
Exactly. Also, they keep bringing up like how it's a lot easier to sneak in small ships into Coruscant aside from a big fleet. Which
did you know it's a lot easier to sneak them in? Did you know you can do that? Did you know that you can hide in the shadows, sense the shadow of another ship? Or did you know that was a trick? Oh, everyone knows that trick, Evan. Did you know about it? It's like 5 times in 2 chapters or something. It brings that up. Even Vader mentions it.
If everyone knew about this, there would be some defenses around it.
Exactly. I mean, yes, you can't tighten it perfectly, but they talk about it like it's a sieve. It's like, come on. Exactly. Yeah, that stood out to me as well. There's a lot of repetition there.
100%. So, do we want to finally move into Xizor and Guri? Because they're kind of a package deal.
Yeah, Guri, I mean, it's not too much to say about as a character. They're just kind of a device, he doesn't really do anything with her as a person. It's just someone to bounce off.
She's an interesting concept, but she's kind of there. I mean, I do like the fact that her dialogue is very clipped, very emotionless. Very much so, which makes, I mean, she is a droid. I mean, she's a human, like she's made to be very human. Like she has a, human, clone tissue. I mean, she's basically the Data of
which is a Cylon. Is another one. Is the way to look at it. Yeah. We've seen the archetype before. We've seen the story decision before. But yeah, it's just there's not much to her. He could have done things with her. He could have played with her as a character and had her own little micro journey. But he just hasn't done so. There's not really much to talk about there.
Yeah, I do like the dialogue that they have when he essentially asks her like, how would you feel about meeting someone like just like you or almost like you, and the fact that she's kind of like, well, whatever. I mean, in my programming, it is what it is. Superior, inferior, makes no difference to me. First of all, very droid style answer, which makes a lot of sense. But I do like the fact that they use that as the juxtaposition of like, she has, I wouldn't say no wants and desires because she does, but she has very, very simplistic wants and desires, whereas Xizor wants to go for the gold no matter what. That sort of, and she's very much like, oh, I can take it or leave it. Xizor is like, I want this, therefore I will make it my everything to focus on that. I do like that they emphasize that difference in the dialogue between them. So I will give him credit for that. Also, the fight with Luke, the fact that she, I like the fact that her capabilities allow her to do certain things, but once Luke kind of accepts the Force, how that turns the tables on her. The fact that she accepts, that she lost and was willing to die, again, very droid-like. I do know that she also she survived the Skyhook destruction, and she would go on to have some presence in some of the comics. I don't really know what came of her after that, but for what she is, I mean, she fulfills her role just fine. I do like the fact that, the dynamic with Leia, like the fact that she couldn't be poisoned, the fact that everyone's so astonished of like what she again, it's very much like if you've seen Data, if you've seen Cylons, you basically know what Guri's all about. Not that she's done badly, it's just
Yeah.
she is what she is, which I guess is appropriate because, she is what she is.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that scene you mentioned before, the kind of the most in depth they get with her as a character, and he plays. I keep saying they. I don't know why I keep saying they. He plays off. Steve Perry plays off the dynamic between the two quite well. She's a good kind of mirror for Xizor to talk to. So that works. But that scene you mentioned in particular, the thing that makes that work for me, because he knows he is talking to a droid. He knows that she's not going to have the human response, as it were, or anything close to it, really. But the thing that makes it work for me as to, answering why he even bothers to ask the question is that she then does, he points out, but you do care about the challenge. You do want to be driven. It's the same thing there. That's what I'm talking about. And so even though she comes back and says, why does it matter? He points out why it matters and demonstrates the fact that she's already stated that she does care in a way. Kind of, he's just playing with something there. It's making the scene worthwhile rather than just be like, well, I asked a pointless question and got a pointless answer. Moving on.
Right.
He's good. He does a good job at justifying
character.
these moments, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely my favorite character scene with her, and that's definitely the most you really get with her as far as just like an arc goes. Also, I mean, the fact that the book keeps emphasizing that she is such a unique like there are others like her, but she's kind of constructed in such a way where even if someone were to like get the basic formula down, it wouldn't quite come out exactly the same no matter what they did, which is interesting. It's a very interesting concept. I just kind of wish they kind of played with it a little bit more, but it is what it is, and she serves her purpose just fine. I don't really have a ton to say about her. What they do with her is perfectly serviceable, like I said. Do you have one thing you want to add?
She looks just as good from the back as she does from the front, as the creepiest weirdo
Indeed.
Xizor points out a few times.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I
moving
guess
on to Xizor himself.
who's kind of I mean, he's the big original character in this book. I mean, we spent so much time with him. He's definitely the most iconic original character. His design and so much. I mean, he is very much one of those like original EU characters that when you ask someone about the EU, like he might not be in like the first 5 people you think of, but he'll definitely be in like the first 20. So definitely something worth pointing out.
It's far from a
on that
one-for-one
note,
comparison,
he
obviously,
is-
but he is the Thrawn of this book. That's the the whole new concept character that's being put in and used to drive the story. Falls very
Although
far of that
ironically
status symbol, in my opinion, though, in terms of the lore. Thrawn is a much more compelling presence. Again, she's always done very well, but he's just such a sleaze and such a skeevy, criminal bastard. It's just like, oh god, okay, get over
He's
yourself.
absolutely despicable. I mean, he's basically he's like the Godfather, like or like any sort of mob boss you would think of, the archetypal. That being said, they get a lot because we spend a lot of POV with him, and we get a lot of characterization. I mean, his sort of slimy, sort of like for him, it's like I mean, it's very obvious what he's about. Like for him, like the best is everything. He thinks he's the greatest thing in the galaxy. He fully believes that he will one day supplant Vader and then eventually supplant the Emperor.
To
what
contend
I will say
with
this, though,
Xizor is to lose. It's like, oh my god, get over yourself.
But to your point, one thing that I like that the writing does is like when you go into his POV, he is constantly emphasizing to himself that he is superior. I am better, I am smarter, I am stronger, I am richer,
and why as well.
everything.
He does spend that time.
Yes.
I mean, obviously it's over the top and it's cheesy and it's sleazy, but it's the point of the character. It's a deliberate character choice, and he justifies as much as he can by saying, "This is why I'm better. I'm cold-blooded. I calculate. I'm patient. I enjoy the finer things in life, but I'm not a glutton." He does highlight all of that.
And he's old. I mean, he doesn't look it, but he's over a century. He has those experiences. He's worked in so many different occupations. But by that same token, I like how it also emphasizes how much of a fraud he is, because the second things don't go his way, he completely loses his control. And the way that is set up is brilliant, because you can see that Steve Perry does something it's really interesting, because when you go into his POV, you start to slowly see the cracks. He starts, saying his thoughts out loud more than he often would.
Yes.
He's quicker to anger. He's so not used to not being in control to the maximum that the second he is, it just all falls apart. And it's also a good contrast between him Vader and the Emperor, because when things go wrong for them, they roll with it. They don't
Yeah.
like it, but they roll with it. And that's the difference with Xizor.
Or it was
because
all according to plan. As I often
or that,
say.
yeah.
It's like it's
But
always
I
going
like how
exactly as I foreseen, right to the point he's thrown over the balcony.
yeah, I see that one coming, did you? But I like also the fact that that emphasizes the idea, like it doesn't spell it out, but that character beat is a great way of showing how this guy could never be the Emperor. He could
Yeah.
never rule
Oh,
the
no.
galaxy.
Absolutely not.
There's no way. Like he could not keep himself controlled to do the things that the Emperor and Vader do. He's just fooling himself.
Yeah.
And the fact that that comes across so strongly is just, it's brilliant. And I love the fact that Steve Perry has the shifts in his POV, shifts in his perspective so drastically when things finally go wrong. The fact that he cracks under pressure so immediately compared to Vader, compared to Luke, compared to Leia, because that defiance and rolling on their feet is not something he's used to. And again, that's all fantastic. That being said, he is, although I like what they do with him, he is still a monster in every sense of the word. I mean, there's no question. I mean, he is a sleaze. He is a snake. I mean, intentionally.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Like bipedal lizard. That being said, you know what they do with him is very like He's the classic you love to hate.
Yes,
sort of
but also you don't even
character.
love to hate him, because I get complete what you mean. You're right, but it's not in the usual sense of like I mean, I guess it doesn't make sense. It would be true for other characters, but it's just you're not, because of all the things he's doing. It's like, oh god, you just feel gross.
He's
you know,
well, I mean, Thrawn's a great example. Like Thrawn's someone, he's despicable, but you could at least kind of see where he's coming from. Xizor is just he's just garbage. He's a monster. He's horrible.
Yeah,
no matter what.
The same slither of icy competency is there for both characters, but where Thrawn is just the kind of military leader, Xizor is just this hedonistic, womanizing, just sadistic assaulter. It's horrible. But the thing that makes it work as a character as well, aside from the fact that we do spend so much time in his head, I mean, even just the laziness. Like, I don't like to exercise. I'm going to sit in a massage chair and get exercise given to me. It's, oh my god! Like, he does some fun choices like that with the character on top of the horrifying stuff. But like you said, it's that shift. It's when everything does fall apart, he just completely collapses. It's being up this image of himself in his head that is true, but also when tested comes flying apart. There are two things there. One, first of all, it makes sense they fly apart. He does, to be fair, get the biggest punch in the face in terms of changing of plans ever. I mean, his entire base is blown up when he was really expecting this to be all wrapped up, and he just wasn't ready for the threat of Luke and the team as a whole, despite the fact he should have been. So there's that. It justifies his falling apart. It isn't just that he's nothing and the whole story we're just bigging him up for no reason. It makes sense there. But also, I would have liked to have seen, and this is perhaps where Guri could have come in better. I would have liked to see someone from the outside looking in, seeing and recognizing and pointing out that falling apart. Didn't need to be explicitly, hold the hand of the reader all the way through, because they can recognize that on the meta level. That's good that it's not being a handhold thing. But at the same time, just someone to really rub his nose in it as a character, to really give us that kind of Schadenfreude experience of, you're not all you've made, crack yourself up to be, are you? Even if that was Vader, just someone to kind of really hold his nose to the dirt and let us enjoy that failure, because he's a horrible character that we do not want to see in any way thriving, and want to maximize on the tragedy.
It's very satisfying when he gets his comeuppance, I will say. You do get little shades of that when Leia defies him too, because they point out the fact that his little pheromone trick has never failed him before, and the fact that Leia is able to
but that's painted in the same. It's painted in the context of, but that's a challenge for you. That's what you wanted, So even then, you've got the skeeviness kind of overlaying that. You can't properly enjoy the failure, because that's what he's looking for in this moment. Yeah, so it's but I know what you mean. It is, at least he's doing bits and pieces throughout, but you feel like you're supposed to enjoy the character when really you can't by design of the character. If you're a decent person anyway. Right. So yeah, it's just
no one should ever look at this guy as any sort of role model.
God no. Although these days more and more might, unfortunately.
Oh God, yeah. But again, to say that he doesn't have, since we do spend so much time with him, you can't say that he doesn't have a lot of layers to his personality. It's just that all of those layers converge into just one kind of singular point. Like the thing, like his rivalry with Vader, for example, like having to do with his family and the biological catastrophe that befall the Falleen and all that. That all makes sense, which actually that would also come back to, that would be mentioned in other stories, leading into the future. I think it was like Rebellion or something, where in one of the comics where like Vader was confronted by a group of, Falleen survivors who tried to assassinate him, but they failed completely. But, things like that. I do like that the lengths that the Empire is willing to go to pacify and just cover up their own mistakes. I mean, obviously, they're willing to blow up planets, for God's sake, so we know that they're capable of doing much worse. But the fact that
yeah,
that's
the Empire's
also
evil, guys, in case you didn't know.
yeah, seriously. I mean, if you don't know at this point, I don't know what to tell you. But I will, that does make sense as a through line for his rivalry with Vader. Again, but I do agree with you. Like, I think we needed more, comeuppance and direct confrontation with Vader. Not that we needed a full-on fight, because
absolutely not. That'd have been ridiculous. Yeah, as he states, that's good that they spend the time on that. And he, as an author, he does the work to make us properly understand the character. He's laying down the foundation. This is a well-rounded, well-executed villain. There's no question about that. It's just because he's where you would ever find the cool factor in someone like Vader, and in him you find the skeevy snake factor. So it's like you can't really enjoy it at the same level,
Right.
Vader's just as much of a monster,
which is
a different
probably
flavor.
by design.
But yeah, exactly. It's a choice. It's not a stumble. It's just the very nature of the choice that's been made. It's like, oh, this guy just is a creepy weirdo. Ugh.
Yeah, you can see where he's coming from, but that doesn't mean you should appreciate it. Which again, you really should. But at the same time, there is quite a bit of depth to him. It just, you can all kind of see where it's going. So I do appreciate the fact. And we spend like the guy, like one of my favorite sequences with him actually is when he's with Jabba, and like when how influential Jabba the Hutt is in the Star Wars galaxy, the fact that Xizor can just casually command Jabba to speak basic, something he does not like to do. Like Jabba prefers to speak in Huttese, but he literally just says speak basic, and he does.
Yeah, he just answers the call alone. The fact that he even turned up on request, it does a good job of showing this guy is a big deal. It's considering it's all put together in one story.
Yeah, the fact that he's able to do that is, you instantly see the kind of influence that this guy has. He views himself as like the third most powerful being in the galaxy. Whether or not that's actually true is debatable, but it is inarguable that his influence is beyond massive. So little character beats like that, you definitely get the idea of the depth of this character. And it's interesting too, because for such an iconic character, like Xizor in the broader lore really doesn't have too many appearances aside from this. Like, he very well could be dead by the end of it. It's kind of left a little bit vague, but like,
it's one of those kind of like dies off page, so he could come back if they wanted him to. Situations,
but he never does come back.
Yeah, therefore you assume he's dead.
Yeah. He does have a few appearances in like stuff before this in the timeline. Like, if I remember correctly, I think he makes an appearance in one of the Last of the Jedi novels. I think it is, Last Jedi with Evan Peele's apprentice, whose name is Havan. That was it. He's in one of those books. He also makes little cameos here and there. Actually, funnily enough, because Calvin and I have been playing some Empire at War recently. Xizor was actually originally going to appear in Empire at War, but they ended up cutting him. But they would actually bring him back for the Corruption DLC. So it's cool that he was in there. So something else worth pointing out, and maybe we'll cover that another day. Yes, but absolutely. Back on topic, it is interesting when you think about it broadly. Again, kind of like Thrawn, because like Thrawn, he shows up, he has his book trilogy, he has a lot going for him, and then that's basically. Thrawn would obviously have other appearances. He has way more appearances than Xizor, but it's kind of in that same vein where his main presence, his debut, there's so much in it that where you could perfectly understand this character even if he never appears again.
Yeah, he didn't need to appear again, so it's definitely not a loss. But yeah, I completely agree. The legwork was done. The various different shades of the character he put in that he didn't have to, but did it for the sake of having that well-rounded character. Little things like trimming the bonsai tree. It's definitely not a bonsai tree. With the scissors, just appreciating the value of things beyond their monetary value. There's the love of
him eating
his
moon
vice.
Moon fruit. That's
Yeah,
Weakness.
that one in particular, and earlier in the story with the restaurant booking, the flavor of a good meal, that's being one of his major vices. This is a character who is hedonistic in his principles and in his base nature, but with that layer of cold patience added on top. There are layers to him. It's just he's a giant dick. So how much of it can you really enjoy? He's a well executed villain, I would say.
Yeah, and he uses women as tools, say the least, and which he tries to do to Leia, which is very, very, very uncomfortable. I know it's intended to be uncomfortable, but that still does not make it any less uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's a hard scene to get through, particularly because it's a Leia, and everything that means for the story.
You don't want to see her go through this.
Yeah, it's well executed, but also who needs to see it, So it's mildly
I mean, I will say like the POV, when you see her POV and how the pheromones like hit her and how her thought process is so jumbled. It's like, wait, I'm not supposed to feel this way, but I'm not supposed to feel this way. Like I like how Steve goes back and forth between, she's affected, not affected, affected, not affected. You can kind of see, like, you can imagine the sort of chemical reaction setting. Again, it's a very uncomfortable scene. I don't like it. But I do appreciate how he's able to differentiate the sort of POVs from a writing perspective. That's interesting. It's a very uncomfortable scene.
Yeah.
Again, I can't emphasize that enough.
Effort went into it. It wasn't just the scene for its own sake. I wouldn't personally have had it because I don't think it adds much to either character or the story as a whole, which is where these kind of scenes tend to be best placed, is when they are impactful for the overall story.
It felt like, we need to further emphasize this guy's evil, even though we've done plenty of that.
Exactly. It's just, it to me, the effort went in to make it, at least passable, but to me, it didn't add anything, and that's the greatest crime. And the fact that it's Leia, it's like, come on,
it's just we didn't need this. Don't do that to Leia, please don't.
Yeah, that's have we got any other characters aside from Xizor that we're missing there that we want to talk about? I think that Wedge turns up, but what's there to say? He's Wedge.
Yeah, not too much. It's worth noting that like we said earlier, like this book establishes, basically the hierarchy of Black Sun leading into the future. Things like the Vigos and moving up through the ranks, what they do. The fact that Xizor has a legitimate as far as he's concerned, shipping organization that does still bring in a lot of money, but it's just contributing to this massive empire. And the fact that this organization is so powerful, I mean, the world building with Black Sun is very impressive, and of course would become the staple from here on out. Obviously, you have things like the Darth Maul comic where Sidious, sends Maul to kind of take out, other head, the Vigos and the head of Black Sun at the time. Garen, I believe his name was, who was mildly force sensitive, actually. Again, I like that continuity. It also does kind of add a bit of, that comic in particular does add a bit of flavor to something Sidious says, where he talks about the fact that, like, oh yeah, Black Sun is powerful, but once you take off the head, two will grow in its place, but they'll be left scrambling. And it's like, but like in the timeline, that he had Maul basically do this in the past to the same organization. So he knows firsthand what he's talking about.
It's for him trimming the weeds, It's just, as far as he's concerned, you just turn the spokes of the wheel a bit and then, carry on.
Yeah, but I like the continuity with Black Sun. I do kind of wish we got a little bit more with the Vigos. I mean, we just kind of get that one meeting. It would have been nice to I'm not saying we should have spent like an entire chapter on it because they aren't relevant characters, but I would have liked it if they kind of add a bit more layer to the power dynamic between Xizor and the Vigos to kind of just make this feel like more of an organization that will pounce at the first sign of weakness. Not that it doesn't do that. I just wish we got a little bit more. But again, that's very mild criticism and really something that doesn't affect the broader narrative at all.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, though. I think that diving into the kind of secondary and tertiary layers to the organization would have made it a stronger piece. I think that we don't see him struggle as a character enough. Everything goes completely fine with him until it doesn't, which lends itself to what we talked about before with the whole cracks coming in his personality and showing that the idea of who he is in his mind is not really accurate. It helps there. But I think we could have also seen just a bit more of a challenge thrown in his way up prior to that point, because he just skates through the entire plot right up into the fact that Luke arrives at his base, I mean, Leia even just just invites herself to his castle and, oh, okay, I mean, I guess I don't even have to try to capture you. You'll just give yourself to me. You're now in my clutches for no reason. That was the worst part of the book for me.
Yeah, it also, I think, would have been nice if we gotten a little bit more backstory on like his family and his like royal lineage and stuff, and the catastrophe that ultimately befell them. I will say this: as much as I enjoy the writing, it did feel kind of ham-fisted when Vader finds out about Xizor's connection with them sterilizing that city. It's like, oh, these records were thought destroyed, but we were able to find them. It's like, okay, but how?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were
it's a little
destroyed.
awkward.
There's the point of that. Yeah, I mean, it's hand wavable, so that's fine. But I get what you mean. It felt very, because of how far into the story it came. It felt very much like, oh, we need to tie all these things up now. All these loose ends need cutting off.
Yeah.
Let's quickly put it together. Also, there are a few moments in the story for Vader, in particular, his underlings, got very lucky. Like he was killing a few people left, right, and center, at least in his mind. But that guy was. I did a good enough job to get some praise and a winning lottery ticket from Darth Vader. Like, Jesus, I've done well.
I do like the dialogue he has where he's like, you will after you complete this mission, you will never have to worry about money again. Such is my generosity.
Exactly.
It's
that is
like,
a rare bit of luck for an underling there.
It is very Vader, and it does kind of tie into what he says in Jedi to the commander. He's like, the Emperor is not as forgiving as I am.
Exactly. And people
very much that
mentions
same
the opposite when all the junior officers have to draw lots, and the person who loses is the one who has to deliver news or go to talk to Vader.
Oh, that's brilliant. It makes sense. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
God, it's tragic.
I completely believe it. I know, right?
But yeah,
but
the other thing as well in tying into that bit was you mentioned the backstory to Xizor. Same thing with Rendar. We get obviously a backstory into his family and how they were put down by the Emperor the way they were. That was brought up and felt like it was setting up a trajectory for him, and it didn't really go anywhere. I would have liked to see perhaps even like a kind of juxtaposition between the two, him and Xizor, that the different effects the Empire has had on them. Some of that played into the theming of the wrap up. The ultimate decisions of the Empire will come to bite them in the ass because it just creates more enemies for themselves. Something about that could have been plugged into the tail end of this to help tie it together and give us an explanation for why it was even brought up in the first place. Because obviously it helps make them more rounded characters just on the face of it alone, but when you put as much effort into defining, I mean, Rendar in particular, you hear that his backstory from like 3 different angles. Like you hear it initially brought up, you hear when Lando talks about it, you hear Luke learning about it later, Leia think about it, etc. So the fact that it comes up multiple times and then Rendar himself gives a little bit of a non-reaction to it later, you feel that it's going somewhere, and to have it not was just a bit of like a missed opportunity for me. Yeah,
maybe if they had if Rendar had come back in like a sequel novel or something, that we could have gotten a bit more of that, or even a prequel which kind of depicts that him. Although I admit him crashing a speeder into one of Palpatine's private castles is a kind of a funny visual to imagine. But yeah, again, like I said about Rendar before, he's a character who I think has a lot of potential. I just wish it would have been realized a little bit more.
He could have. It felt like they were teeing up another Kal-Katarn. It felt like he was going to be the Han Solo version of Kal-Katarn within the.
And he was
Kal-Katarn
arguably before Kyle was.
Yeah,
depending.
exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. It just felt that's kind of what he was supposed to be, and he just kind of sailed off into sunset and was never seen again. So yeah, it's a shame. But the fact that we wanted to see more of him speaks to the quality of him in the book, at least. But yeah, is that about it for the whole, or are you ready to start wrapping this up?
Yeah, I mean, for all of our criticisms, I would say, this is still a fantastic book, in my opinion. Whether you're a fan of the game or a fan of like some of the other tie-ins to this, everything, at least I imagine, is mostly consistent. For everything that it does get wrong, it does get a hell of a lot right with the characterization. The writing is very simple, but simple does not mean bad, and the certain beats that it does have, things like with the occasional prose and the descriptors really do lend itself to a very immersive experience. It's dense, but everything has a purpose. And that's what I really think that we really should hammer home in this review. It's dense. There's a lot of different settings, a lot of different characters, but everything converges to a point where you buy it. You understand why these events take place in the way they do. And it's an excellent setup for Return of the Jedi, which is, very much the intent. If you had any sort of curiosities about some of the things that come up in that film, this doesn't necessarily exceed on all fronts, but it definitely does exceed on certain elements to it. So because of that, it's definitely a big recommendation from me, and I imagine you as well.
I mean, yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you've just said there. For the most part, all of my critiques are light ones. I think this is more of like a solidly good book rather than a fantastic one compared to some of the others we've been talking about recently. I think taken slice by slice, the density of this is much more appreciable that way. You come to the story and take each piece as it comes rather than trying to race your way through it the way you might with some of the other stories in the Star Wars universe. I think the midsection of the book is the best part. We talked about the casino. He gets a lot right there. That's where it kind of the whole package comes together the best, I think, for me. His characterizations are fantastic. Just everything you said. The humor as well is a big addition for me. I really found this funny in a big way, particularly surrounding the characters that he's chosen to focus on. But again, I would, in terms of the critiques, I would have liked to see a bit of polish on this. I would have liked to see some of the overall through lines tightened up. I would have liked to see some of the ideas that have been played with bits and pieces throughout the story tied together better and given that kind of connective tissue so that we can properly enjoy the overall kind of story coming together more and the themes attached to it. There's a lot, as we've been talking through this in long form, there's a lot here that could have been a lot better had it just had a little bit of polish on the end. But that being said, for what we do get a very enjoyable story. And yeah, just one slice at a time. Don't rush this one. A lot happens.
Take your time, but you will definitely come back with something that will stick with you. And for the fact that it is so close to being excellent does really speak to its overall quality.
And yeah, that's been our analysis of Shadow of the Empire. Hope you guys have enjoyed. I am Callan, and I still have an outro.
Evanova95, we hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys later.
Goodbye.